Yo, welcome to episode 44 of the We All Serve podcast, continuing to surprise many by showing that we actually are capable of following through on this and continuing to grow with many subscribers, actually literally like thousands of people downloading each and every episode. But episode 44 with the handsomer co-host. Handsomer, is that a word?
I don't know. We're closing in the big 5-0. That's all I know.
That's wild. And I mean, hey, I will say this. We always talk about who's next up on the show, but I will tell you, well, let's start there, and then I'll tell you about some of the upcoming guests over here. But Angel, you want to tell us about Todd Connor, our mutual buddy, who's going to be on next week?
I call him the Todd Connor. It's like the Ohio State. Todd Connor was a naval officer, and he left the Navy as a surface warfare officer. He was a Northwestern guy, and then he came to Chicago, did some stuff with Chicago Public School District, and then he started this organization called Bunker Labs, and it's national. He's since I think he retired. He's like chairman emeritus or something like that, and he's written a book. He runs a podcast called Third Shift Entrepreneur. He's just such an amazing person and human being. I just feel lucky to call him my friend.
Oh my God.
He's the reason why, I was lucky enough to do well in Chicago. He's just such a good dude.
Todd is awesome, and I've had him on my radio show, and just excited to sort of dig into his service. And I mean, he is like giving constantly. I mean, there's pretty much probably any veteran in this country that's in business probably has heard of Todd Connor. He's a hero. He is freaking awesome. So excited for that conversation next week.
So approachable. Like, you can pick up the phone and call Todd, and he will actually answer the phone.
He totally will.
His assistant. No, it's me.
Then the following week, we've got Dr. Mark Broker, who is a retired 06 Navy. I know you like that, Angel. And I mean, he's a leadership expert. He wrote a book called Lessons from the Navy that recently came out. So very excited for that conversation the following week. And then looking at the week after that, man, oh man, I'm excited for this. We've got the most recent Sergeant Major of the Army, Dan Daly. Who is very excited to have, again, the top enlisted leader of the United States Army on the show. And then we've got a retired Rear Admiral coming on. So, I mean, man, oh man, these next 4 or 5 weeks, freaking awesome. So, Angel, how can people learn about these episodes?
They need to subscribe, share, phone a friend, start a chat room, do something. Tell people about it, because what's the most fantastic thing about the podcast is not that the guests are so incredible, which they are and accomplished. It's the character that they bring and the struggles that they've gone through to become the patriots and people that we admire so much.
I mean, Angel, pinch me over here, because the caliber of people that, exactly as you said, the people that are tuning in, the people that are coming on We All Serve, it's just incredible. 44 episodes ago to imagine that we'd have a fellow like Court Harris on this program.
Oh man, yeah, let's bring him up, because I just can't wait to talk to my buddy.
I'm super excited. Here he is, Court Harris, the one and only. So, Court, Angel, do you want to do the intro?
No, you should read it, because I'm just going to tell you stuff that I probably shouldn't tell you about Court.
You know what? Let's sort of nip that in the butt right now. So,
he is a wine aficionado. He kicks my butt every time we go golfing. Let's talk about that stuff.
Let's talk about the important stuff, okay? Court began his career as a U.S. Army officer, multiple combat deployments, worked on NATO staff during Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan, spent 5 years in consulting tech startup space in our hometown of Chicago. He is a USMA graduate, West Point. He probably has that ring somewhere on his finger over there. And he is the chairman of the board of Chicago Executive Airport and on the board of Objective Veteran Smile, a true example of continuing to serve. So do you have that ring on, Court?
I don't. Thanks for the introduction, Shalom.
His wedding ring. You better let her kill him.
Big shoes to fill with Todd coming up, and the recently retired Sergeant Major of the Army, and I haven't written a book, so I still got a lot left to do.
You're a lot younger than those guys.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off and start off with. I mean, usually we'll Shalom will ask a couple questions about your early years, but I want to dive into some of the things you do with Chicago Executive Airport. And how does someone become the chairman of Chicago Executive Airport? And I'm personally grateful because you brought me in and trusted me, which tells me one thing. This is someone who doesn't just talk about veteran employment and believing in that leadership skill set, but actually believes in it and trusts them to bring them in on projects. So can you tell us a little bit about your role there?
Yeah, sure. I think not to sound like an advertisement for LinkedIn, but relationships matter, right? So you asked how I got involved with the airport, or how do you get to be chairman of an airport, and it's pretty simple. What they taught us in the Army, have relationships. So I joke around that the best thing to come out of a failed political attempt was the people that I met. So in 2015, I ran for a very small local office out in the Chicago suburbs and did not win. But on the heels of that, one of the people that I got to know and that supported me was involved with the airport and had 50% of the appointment power of the board of the airport. And, the chairman resigned back in 2016, and I got a call, and the gentleman said, "Hey, you ran a good campaign. You got character. You got some smarts. How would you like to be involved with an airport?" So I think it just goes back to what you guys are doing, introducing a lot of people to each other, just planting seeds and letting those relationships grow.
Yeah, and your road to that and to where you're at right now, working with Chamberlain Advisors, and we'll talk more about that later in the cast, was not always an easy one. It was, you went from, let's talk about the tech startup, and you did the tech thing, and then the company got bought out. Can we talk about that? Because it was like repeated, where most of us would have been like, man, what now? Man, what now? And it seemed like you just get started, and then it's like, man, that road ended. Let me go. I got to pivot and go somewhere else. And it's just such a great testament of resiliency. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. I think they tell us in the military, right? Focus on doing the right things. The outcome will follow. And I think that's especially true in the startup space. There's obviously a great deal of luck in finding a startup that actually makes it and either gets acquired or goes public. And makes a bunch of money. But in my case, I got out of the military. I went to a small consulting firm in the IT space. Within 6 months of working there, that startup got acquired by Grant Thornton in Chicago, one of the major audit advisory and consulting firms in Chicago. And that was kind of the end of most of us at that smaller firm. Again, the idea was right. I knew I wanted to be in front of people talking. I wanted to be relationship based. I wanted to have an aspect of selling, and found a great organization. It just, things happen, right? And the next startup I went to was one called Outcome Health in Chicago. Many of you might be familiar with the story, but at one point had a $5 billion valuation. When you get that kind of valuation, you get that kind of scrutiny in the press. All of a sudden, things weren't necessarily as they seemed at the top, right? And again, there was nothing nefarious going on with all of us that were involved in the day-to-day and running the company. Just some stuff with the founders and what was going on with the books or what wasn't going on with the books. And it's just a great lesson in terms of find the right thing, do the right process, worry about the process, the outcome you don't necessarily have control over, and that was the case with Outcome Health.
So Angel is my brother from another mother over here, but we are very different in the sense of he calls it a cast, I call it a pod. He always starts with what you're doing now. I always like to start with where you began. So you are one of the. I'm just an OCS guy. I mean, I'm just a simple man over here. You went to the academy. And so I'm curious what your family was like when you decided to join the Army. Are you an Army brat yourself? And tell us again what you branched and sort of the beginning of your Army career.
Yeah, so Shalom, I think it's a great story. Everybody has a story why they joined the military. And I think mine hits home particularly because it starts way back when I was 3 and 4 years old. I had cancer. So I had a rare form of cancer called acute promyelocytic leukemia. Very rare in children. This is back in 1987, showing my age. And the doctor that treated me at Advocate Lutheran General Hospital in the suburbs of Chicago was a South Korean immigrant, and I was his first U.S. patient after graduating medical school in the United States. And he did his job. Obviously, I'm here talking to you guys, so I'm alive because of him, and 9 rounds of chemotherapy. But that really hit home. You start to remember things when you're 3 and 4 years old, and I remember going in to those rounds of chemo. I remember a lot of the pain. I remember my parents, and some of what they were going through, the stress that they were going through. And I always thought, I want to be a doctor. Right, I want to give back just like this guy gave back, right? Dr. Klein was his name. And I got into high school and realized when I wasn't doing well in high school biology and physics that the doctor route might not be the way to go. So I kind of made the first pivot, right? And I said, okay, if I'm not going to get past medical school, how else can I give back? How else can I provide opportunity? And to your point about my family has a long military tradition. My dad was in the National Guard for 33 years. Uncles in the military, grandfather in World War II, started looking at the service academies and realized that there was a way to give back and serve the country in that capacity. So I often say I went to West Point because it was the best school I got into, but that's not entirely true, right? Definitely wanted to serve and give back. So entered West Point, graduated, became an air defense artillery officer, and eventually served 6 years, got overseas, and had a great time and felt honored to be able to lead men and women.
So thank you for that, and that's an incredible story, and especially looking at again what you're doing now, it's amazing. So I have to ask, why did you get out? 6 years. You clearly had a busy, a couple of deployments in there. You explained why you got in. What caused you to make that transition out, and what was that like?
Yeah, great question. When I was in the military, this was back, I graduated from West Point in 2007. We were in the middle of a two-front war. And we didn't necessarily know what was going to happen in our careers, but we knew we were going overseas, right? And, that tempo, we talk about op tempo a lot as veterans or as military officers, right? What's the op tempo? And I kind of quickly fell into a cadence of a year in the United States at Fort Bliss, a year in the Middle East, a year in the United States, a year in the Middle East. And, a lot of people are comfortable with that, and a lot of people thrive on that. And, it got to the point, my second deployment in Afghanistan, I was an aide. It was a great year, learned so much being an aide to a general in a deployed environment. But it was just really fast. It was, I didn't have a lot of time to date, to try to start a family. And, deployments make you, figure out what's really important to you. And I felt like I accomplished what I set out to when I wanted to serve. And I just said, I think there's other things in the private sector I want to do, and stuff like that. So the transition out in 2012 was a lot different than I think it is now. We talk about programs like the DoD Skill Bridge program right now. Things like that didn't exist back in 2012. I got back from a deployment in July of 12, and I was out of the military by Christmas. And it was a lot more of the, pat you on the back, tell you where the VFW is, and say thanks for your service. The nearest VA in Chicago is Great Lakes or Hines, and put you on your way. And I think we've come a super long way in the last 8 years on helping transition veterans out of the service into the private sector.
Yeah, you in particular do a lot with that. With our good friend Matt Schockman, who's the chairman of a staffing company called Chamberlain Advisors. I remember when he's doing a lot of stuff, and you run the veteran programs for Chamberlain Advisors. And one thing that I found really interesting was, and how you continue to get back, is we talked about a gap in the market between where veterans can be, they're sharp, they've got soft skills, leadership, and all those kind of things. But there's an error. Sorry. There's that gap where they don't know how to enter the financial space and the financial sector, financial services, whether it be private equity, venture capital, there's all kinds of banking. And you guys have a program that is almost like a finance boot camp, if you will. Can you talk to us a little bit about that program and what how you're able to support those clients and the veterans?
Yeah, absolutely. And forgive me if I talk fast, because it's really easy to talk fast. I get excited when talking about this because I'm really passionate, as you guys are, with helping veterans transition into the right role. And I think, to start off, I think I think we all have a responsibility to help people who aren't veterans or are in hiring manager positions to kind of change the conversation around hiring veterans. I think that's number one, right? So one of the companies that I'm studying in grad school right now is Starbucks, right? And I'm doing a project on their corporate social responsibility. And part of that is, they want to hire a certain number of vets within 5 years, right? And
yes, 25,000.
Yeah, part of the initiative to hire 10,000 vets by 2025 or whatever, right? And I think part of that conversation needs to evolve in terms of, we don't want to just give veterans a chance to check the block to get them in the organization. We want to find the right fit, right? A better metric would be how many of those veterans are still with that company after 3 years or after 5 years. And I think when we talk about that metric, the point you brought up, Angel, is really important, right? The gaps, right? There's generally a couple gaps when people are coming into the private sector, right? A confidence gap, a skills gap, and what I would call a Rolodex gap, right? The network gap. And a couple of those can be filled easily with mentors and good preparation and due diligence. So if you're getting out of the military, lean on the people that have gotten out before you, find some mentors in the areas that you want to go into, et cetera. But the one gap that you definitely need to overcome that just can't be solved by a relationship is that knowledge gap. And particularly in finance, I think there's this stigma that if you're a veteran and you want to go into finance, you got to get out of the military, you got to go to a top 10 MBA like Wharton or MIT, and then you have to go into investment banking and put your 2 years in as an associate.
Why'd you use those? I would have said Booth and Kellogg. What the heck's wrong with you? You call yourself a Northwestern student? What the heck's going on here? I'm calling somebody. I was just spreading the love.
I don't want to be too biased to Chicago. But
sorry,
Kellogg, Michigan, all those, right? The top 10, Booth, et cetera. And, that's not necessarily the case, right? There's an ability to go in, finance is a broad term. There's a lot of different roles that you could say are finance. And really the only thing preventing people from the military who want to get into those roles, who have a passion or an interest to go into finance, are hard finance skills. And most people in the military, even if they're in a finance related role, like they're a finance officer in the Army or something else like that, they still don't do corporate world finance, right? And that's where, Chamberlain thinks
no evaluations in the military.
Yeah, right? Finance in the military is done by spreadsheets, right? You just open up the spreadsheet and you fill it out and you send an email. And that's not the way it works in the private sector, right? So I think, the general hypothesis is, hey, look, we're going to put you through a virtual finance boot camp with a certification at the end, right? This isn't just something you go on and you complete and you're done. You actually get a financial analyst certification that the same firms on Wall Street use to vet the undergrads that are coming out of colleges who want to get into finance, right? So this is a real certificate that's going to say, hey, you know something. And what that does is that gives you the skills to come in on day one in a finance and an entry-level finance role and perform at the same level as somebody who may have just completed their undergrad with a concentration in finance and had done an internship between their junior and senior year. So the idea is we're going to level set you to come in to contribute on day one. And then those soft skills that you mentioned, Angel, right? That leadership, that performing under pressure, that character, that's going to help you ascend faster than your peer group coming in who are 22, 23 years old coming out of undergrad.
So you mentioned those technical skills. Are you also teaching them? Are they also teaching them different methodologies? Because in my career right now, I'm like, there's going to be a ramp up time where I have to learn all these different methodologies that are applicable to that industry. And you guys are approaching that as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of organizations, a lot of finance companies, and we work, for instance, a lot with commercial banks, right? They're going to have their own systems. They're going to have their own training, their own proprietary kind of stuff. Our goal is to get you to be able to perform a 3-statement model that's circular in Excel with no formula errors in 90 minutes. And if you can do that and you pass certification, those firms we work with know that you're going to be able to pick up whatever system or software they happen to use.
Great. Court, I'm sorry, Shalom?
Yeah, no, it's wild what you're doing. So I want to hear a success story. Tell us about some of the veterans that and employers. Tell us about some of that feedback that you've received and some of the things that you've seen.
Yeah, thanks.
Angel's laughing over there.
Oh, a success story. Yeah, you got me one of my first jobs. How's that?
Yeah, guys, it's really rewarding to see some of these placements. So I'll give you one that hits home because the Angel's point about being Chicago-centric. So we had a guy who went to the University of Illinois and decided that after he graduated from the University of Illinois, he wanted to enlist in the Army, right? So here's a guy who has a bachelor's degree from one of the best public undergrad schools in the nation. He completed an internship at a private equity firm during his schooling and then said, I want to go be in the Army, right? So he enlists in the Army, becomes an engineer, goes to sapper school, wins NCO of the year at Fort Bragg, and serves 6 years, culminating as a staff sergeant, right? He decides, like many others, that he's done a lot in the military and he has other goals he wants to pursue. So he gets out. We get introduced to him through our network at Chamberlain, and we placed him after he completed the financial boot camp at a private equity firm in the suburbs of Chicago, who's taking a consumer goods company public next year, and he's now a financial analyst there. And just crushing it, right? He's just crushing it because everything that made him successful in the military is making him successful in the private sector, right? He just needed that chance, and that chance hinged on a hiring manager saying, okay, I know that you've mitigated the risk because you've done this financial boot camp, because you have certification, because you have a basic set of skills in finance that I'm comfortable with.
Thank you guys for creating that connectivity to bridge that gap. I think that's just so important. Most of us just need a chance, an intro and a chance, and someone to believe in us. And that's just such a fantastic program. I know Shalom's going to put the website up if anyone wants to learn more about that. I just want to ask, is there someone you want, and I use Shalom, I hate you. You're going to hate me because I'm taking your question.
No, you're good.
Is there, throughout your military career and transition, someone you want to give a shout out to that really molded you and made like whether it be a staff sergeant or sergeant that kind of gave noogies to Lieutenant Court, and you said, man, I really wish I could thank that guy or female.
Sure. I mean, there's so many.
I'm from the Midwest. Guys is a unisex term.
That's right. Hey guys, right? Unisex.
Hey guys.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's so many people, right? Just like you and just like many others listening to this, there's so many people that touch you in your career. We'd spend an hour. If you gave me an hour, I could fill it up with thanking people. Just one in particular who's still serving, I think, who had a big impact was, I mentioned I was in Afghanistan as an aide. The general officer that I was an aide for is his name is Chris Cavoli. He's now a 4-star general, and in Europe as the USAR commander. And it was an example of what servant leadership looks like. We were in Afghanistan, and I think other than our 2-week leave period, I think we worked 18, 19-hour days straight for a year, and that's what it took. Managing a combat area the size of Missouri. We were in the western part of Afghanistan, managing a combat zone the size of Missouri with 9,000 troops spread out doing battlefield circulation. But I saw an example when I was there in Afghanistan with him in 2011 to 2012. It was pretty apparent after a couple of weeks. I'm like, this could be the chief of staff of the Army one day. And just everything I learned from him, I've taken with me in terms of what to do and what not to do.
Totally wild. We learn from people. I experience this each and every day. Still being in uniform, I learn from everybody, regardless of rank and background. I mean, it's just there's always something to learn. But definitely, you can definitely see those people that mold you. And again, it has nothing to do with rank. It's That's incredible. That's absolutely awesome. So, Court, I have to ask, what is next? What is next? You're already having that impact. You're already exemplifying, again, that we all serve, attitude that we love to talk about here, through Chamberlain, through your service, your civic service, obviously your time in uniform. What's that big project? You mentioned in the beginning, writing a book. Is that something on the horizon?
In your intro, you mentioned both. Obviously, Todd's written a book, and you were talking about some others that you had coming up on the podcast that had written books. So it made me feel like I need to write a book. Definitely not in the works right now. I think
I'm writing a coloring book. It's going to be connected dots. It's going to have all kinds of role games. Maybe some Sudoku.
I don't even know if I could do that. I'm an Army guy. I'm artillery. You got to speak slowly and loudly. I'm not sure I could handle the Sudoku book, but I think one of the things I'm passionate about, we talk about finding passions outside of the professional life. Members of Congress and state and local level elected officials, veterans are at their lowest level of elected office since World War II, right? And if we look at, there's an inverse proportionality in terms of the military being trusted and elected officials not being trusted, right? And I think if we had more veterans in office, that would do a lot towards the confidence in our elected officials. And I think that's something I'm passionate about. There's a lot of organizations that do it at the national level, right? That provide training and funding for people that want to run for Congress. But what I think, when we just finished up the election cycle in Illinois, the local election cycle, the people at the local and the state level have more influence and impact on your life than the members of Congress, right? When you think about property tax, when you think about your libraries and your schools, that's all at the local level, right? And we need to get veterans in those positions, not only because of the character that I mentioned, right? Everyone in the military probably has pretty high character, probably knows how to work under stress, knows how to be a member of a team, but also because that's going to do a lot to bridge that civil military divide. When you get those veterans in elected office at the local level, people can see that we're just like everybody else. We care about the same thing. We care about our kids. We care about our communal resources, all that kind of stuff. So I'm passionate about that. Would love to hear from anyone who has the same goals and aims, see what we can do. And I think that's something that, I'll be hopefully involved in over the next couple of years.
That's wild. And in terms of my final question over here is just in terms of, again, we talked about some of your involvement, the airport. You also, I know you are involved in a nonprofit as well. I believe I mentioned it in the bio. How can people be engaged, be involved in some of those areas?
Yeah, great question. I think, from a board standpoint, I think it's really neat and cool if people volunteer for boards, right? So there's a couple different kinds. You got your nonprofit boards, and then you got your private company boards, which is a whole different thing. But the idea of serving on a board that's a nonprofit or a community board, I know Angel's done that in Chicago as well. That can help with relationships and introductions and with the business side, but it's also a way to give back, right? All of us in some way wanted to give back, or else we wouldn't have put the uniform on. And when we're not in uniform, how can we find ways to give back? Serving those organizations that need leadership is a great way to do it. I'm happy to, somebody has questions about serving on a board, reach out. But, just go to the community, LinkedIn, you can find board searches on LinkedIn, ask around. There's more organizations that need help than not out there. So I think it's really just a raising your hand and saying, hey, I'd like to get involved, and asking the network, where you can.
Well, thank you so much, Court, for everything you do for the rest of us, the Festivus for the rest of us. And I really look forward to seeing what you do over the next couple of years and where you land, and watching your impact as it continues to flourish.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me on.
And thanks so much, Court. Really, really a pleasure. Thanks for all that you do to continue to serve, and definitely looking forward to continuing to engage. And I know you're going to continue to have an awesome impact. So before we wrap episode 44, I always love to talk about episode 45. So again, we've talked about him, Todd Connor, the Todd Connor. There we go. That's going to be the same time next week. So Angel, one last plug of how people can tune in and make sure they don't miss an episode.
Phone a friend, call, subscribe, share, post on LinkedIn and say, I heard this really awesome podcast, and share it on your LinkedIn feed.
Yeah,
works great.
Yeah. And
people can dial in, and they can hear stories from court, and they can hear stories from all our phenomenal guests, because I think you record those and you have them on the website. And they can just listen to
YouTube, everything. And again, if you're just listening to this, you should probably get on YouTube so you could actually see the funny facial reactions that Angel makes when I say something stupid. But again, if you're watching, then you probably don't want to see our faces ever again. So make sure you're going on your favorite podcast app. So there we go. That'll be a wrap. Episode 44 of We All Serve. We'll be back next week with the one and only Todd Connor. Again, Court Harris, thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next week.